Okay.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Sokol, and I'm here with my life coaching partner, Jim Stroker. Um, and he just gave a wave. And Gabby Wilday, who is the founder of No Fuss Lunch. She's been providing uh, healthy lunches for kids in 63 schools and
Amazing.
is just doing such amazing things in the space of healthy eating and during COVID, really putting so much energy into helping others. But just to start, tell us a little bit about how you started No Fuss Lunch and what that company was like before COVID-19.
So it's been 8 years ago. It's been 8 years now that No Fuss Lunch has been in existence. I started the company back when my oldest daughter, Amelie, was in first grade. And ironically, I guess part of the genesis of No Fuss Lunch was I couldn't wait to stop making lunches. With three little ones at home, and I was working, and it was always a challenge to kind of figure out, what do I make today? Well, what did I make yesterday? What did I make the day before, right? So it just became such a challenge. My twins were in preschool, and I just couldn't wait. When I saw that menu online for first grade, I signed up for every single day that I possibly could. I was happy to write out the check. It was like a gift. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, my daughter, for whatever reason, did not like the lunch. And not that we're really fancy eaters, and I certainly didn't have any culinary training at the time. I grew up in a very large Italian family, and food was very much a part of our life. So I was around good food. I enjoyed good food. I love to eat. And I wanted something better for my kids. So, I think everyone can kind of relate if you think about that morning where you're sending your kids off to school. You haven't purchased lunch, but you forgot to make it. So you kind of have this like mini panic attack around 10 o'clock saying, oh no, should I call a deli? Should I call a pizza restaurant? What am I going to do? Do I have anything in the house that I can put together quickly and run up to school? So I had a few of those mornings. And, when I went to drop off lunch, there was this big table. And things have changed since then just because of security issues and whatnot. But there was this big table filled with lunches, and you could smell the French fries, and some of them were fast food bags, right? Some of them were from delis, from pizza parlors. So it was like a huge aha moment for me that there were other parents like myself that for whatever reason chose not to purchase lunch from the school lunch provider at the time, but didn't really have the time to make one at home. So, a little light bulb went off, and I said, well, there's got to be a solution here. And, that's really how it started. And I think as things started to progress with No Fuss Lunch, there was like so much great learning, right? There was like a really, key piece of information that I'd never really thought about around peer pressure and how it can work in a really positive way, right? So if we want children to make healthy choices as they, grow and enter into adulthood, we have to expose them to healthy food at a very early age. And I always tell my kids, like, just try it, please, just try it. Like, what if you never tried ice cream? I mean, where would we be, right? I mean, we'd be really missing out on something really good, right? So, early learning was that peer pressure can work in a really positive way. Like if your child is sitting next to their friend and their friend is eating a bowl of lentil soup, they're more inclined to try it and think it's cool, and they actually might like it, right? I think early on as well, the other really key piece of learning for us was that, we're not Europe. We're not Japan. You're never going to see a viral video of our children having a cheese course during school lunch. Like, it's just not in our culture, right? Mm-hmm. However much I wish it was, it's just not, right? So kids like to eat things that are familiar, that they can recognize as being X or Y. I think one day we put together this gorgeous, like, organic corn muffin, and we sliced up nitrate-free hot dogs, and we baked it up, and we thought this was going to be such a huge success. And the kids were like, what is this? And of course they were hungry for the rest of the day because they didn't recognize what it was. And we just kind of made this thing up hoping it would be successful, and it was not successful at all, right? So what we've done at No Fuss Lunch is try to put together a menu of familiar things, right, that will satisfy the pickiest eaters as well as options for those kids that are a little bit more daring. But we try and make everything with really wholesome ingredients, as organic as possible, without like what we consider not such good stuff, right? And we all kind of have heard what they are, so that we're providing like really pristine, clean nutrition. At the same time, recognizing that there is no nutrition in a lunch that goes uneaten, right? So it's that balance of how do you provide good, clean food that's nutritious, and how do you get kids to eat it? Because if it doesn't taste good, if there's a texture that's unfamiliar, they're not going to go for it.
Yeah. I mean, the piece that just intrigues me tremendously during this, obviously we're all in a state of, we're going to be a new norm, and many, many people are going to have to reinvent themselves. So you came up with an idea that was nowhere. Jocelyn and I were talking about ideas. We talk about ideas all the time, but to take it from idea A, and actually where you are right now, 9 years later, with how many people do you employ? About
a lot. Right now, not so many.
But I mean, you're like every mom in Ridgewood that's going, somebody ought to do something about this lunch situation. I wonder if I could deliver lunches. And you actually reinvented yourself in some way. Whoever you were before, you said, I'm going to get in this business and I'm going to make it happen. And that piece, I think if you can share, you took it to the finish line. You didn't just go, here's an idea. I can't imagine what it's like to get the bid to do the lunch program at 63 schools in the state of New Jersey. Somebody had to go in there and be the force. And obviously that's what you are. You look like you're kind, soft, compassionate, caring, but obviously you're fierce, determined, and unstoppable. So how did you take this from zip to superstar business from where it is now?
Well, first of all, I have to acknowledge that I have an amazing team that I work with, so it's not really just me. I'm lucky enough to have people that have actually been with me since inception and are extremely committed. So that's the first piece. I think the second piece is when you're passionate about what you do, you're really unstoppable, right? I think, all entrepreneurs have had moments, and I've certainly had many of these moments where you wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What if XYZ happens? And, along the way, there's certainly been critics, as they're everywhere for sure. And there's also been, more supporters, if you will. But, I think the key for me was twofold. It was having such a passion and understanding the complexity and, the inefficiency of food service management and how the government program has evolved over the years, right? I think it started off with really great intentions of bringing like surplus, farm food to, organizations and institutions that needed it. And I think the problem is that there's really been no innovation since inception. I mean, if you look back, there's just been nothing new, right? So it's like, how do you take something and look at the inertia and then think of how you can innovate it, and how do you work with, and these are things that, we think about all the time. Like, how do you work with, it's kind of like the trifecta, right? It's like, I like to call, and I'll call myself one of these as well, like the alpha mom and dads, right? The people that had big jobs, and made huge decisions and, have long-term vision, and now have focused some or part or all of that energy into their children and providing the best possible, place for their children. And then you marry that with, a company, I feel like No Fuss Lunch, that is constantly innovating and thinking, what can we do better? What can we change? What can we implement? And then, the third piece of that puzzle is, these innovative school administrators who can connect the dots between what children are eating in the multi-purpose room and how they're learning, right? So all three of those have really kind of fueled, if you will, No Fuss Lunch over the years. And really, I mean, the growth trajectory has been, more than we could have ever, expected.
That's great.
During the onset. But, it's really those three things, and the belief that, our kids deserve better.
That's great.
So speaking of, reinventing yourself and being innovative, March 13th, 2020, you're proposed with doing this again. So, schools are shutting down and you have to reinvent yourself again. So tell us about that.
It was, I guess I can say, like, as a management team, we saw the writing on the wall, obviously, like everybody did. But, what was happening, like probably 3 weeks prior, starting in the end of February, is we were getting contacted by many of our schools, giving us the heads up that they'd be closing for one day. Can you please cancel all the lunches for one day for everybody that ordered? Because the faculty was getting together to kind of do contingency planning, right? So like, how are we going to operate remotely and implement, this unprecedented, teaching style and learning style in the event that schools closed, right? So clearly that was, a signal to us that things were probably going to change drastically. So we started to think about, like, what could we do? First thing we did, unfortunately, is we put together, a package on unemployment, right? How to apply for unemployment benefits. Here's the link. Here's the questions that they're going to ask you. And we communicated with every one of our employees, letting them know that this was a possibility and that we wanted to have them the information so that they could act quickly. The second thing we did was talked about, like, what can we use that we have? How can we leverage our infrastructure and our skills to be able to maintain some type of normalcy during whatever is going to be, right? So we'd already talked about, like, well, we have this great tool. We have amazing developers in Germany that are available to us via Skype 24/7. They're in the same boat that we are. They want to keep working. Maybe we could put together some type of family meal offering, right? So then March 13th hit, and we knew that there was no more schools. When you're a school lunch provider, right, and you have none of your schools operating, you have zero income. But you still have a staff, right? And, although, some of my employees are, salaried employees and are in a much better position than others, many really live paycheck to paycheck, right? So what can you do as an organization to keep as many people employed as possible? So we were able to very quickly, with our developers, modify our site to be able to offer family meals. And slowly but surely, we realized that it wasn't just nourishment, right? People didn't just need a family meal. They wanted to do something, right? Everybody wants to help. It's like, how can I help? What can I do? You see on social media, people who, would argue over different points of view, somehow coming together now. And because we all have this like common, innate, it's like, it's visceral need to do something to help, right? So we said, well, what if we put up a box where people could donate a meal to a resident of Ridgecrest or somebody that lives alone that can't get up to the grocery store? And then we added a box that said, donate a box lunch, right, to a hospital, to Valley or to St. Joe's or to Holy Name. And it was overwhelming, the response that we were getting. And then we get inquiries like, do you have eggs, right? Do you have bulk chicken tenders, Bell & Evans? Do you have cold cuts? Do you have milk? Well, these are all perishable items that we had, right? So we looked to what we had on stock and then in stock. And then we thought about like, well, what can we still procure? And our produce supplier, they want business as well. Like we're all in this, listen, I feel like we're all weathering the storm. We're just in different boats, right? And some of us are in floats and rafts and other are in big, hardy, lifeboats, right? So how can we help each other? And so I think through looking at the infrastructure that we had, leveraging the relationships with our suppliers and also our developers in Germany, and really like having really good listening, right? And thinking about what feedback we were getting from, our clients in the community, we were able to put together an offering that's helping to keep some of our employees working and sane. And so that's a good thing.
And how fulfilling for you to be doing, what you loved doing before, making healthy meals for people, and then donating that to, I know you've donated so much to healthcare workers at Valley, and then you mentioned a couple other hospitals. So that's really must be an incredible experience just for you as a person.
I think for all of us, like we've been going into New York City, right? Because, Weill Cornell has 1,000 healthcare workers a shift working. They've called in, like we all hear about on the news, right? Like they're calling in dermatologists who, and I don't mean to be flip, are used to like popping pimples, right? And they're now on the front lines working with ICU patients, right? So it is the volume and the scale is just, they need to subsidize what is being, served in these small hospital cafes, right? They were accustomed to maybe having, 250, and I'm just throwing a number out there, healthcare workers, during a shift, and now they have 1,000, right? So, to be able to drive into New York City and park outside Weill Cornell and work with the staff there to put together a war room with boxed lunches to feed and nourish these healthcare workers. They come out of their shift, they don't know if it's day or night, right? And it's, it's so many businesses. It's businesses in Ridgewood, it's businesses all over the country, right? That have the means to be able to do something to help people. Yeah. And they are. And I want to say, like, and I know we all kind of want to be positive, right? And thinking, about all the good that's coming out of this. And I really, truly believe there is a lot of good that's coming out of this. I want to say like 95% of the people that I've encountered during this crisis, whether it be people I work with or, people that I interact with socially, have been so wonderful and so compassionate and so tolerant, maybe in areas that they weren't before. They're genuinely good. And then there's the 5%, right? That, you wish things were different, right? You wish they could think differently. But I think given the state of affairs right now, there's so many different emotions that people are experiencing. And we kind of have to give everyone a pass, right? I mean, it's just people are affected in different ways. And
what are you referring to?
I just think in general, like I mean, I really feel like at a time like this is we're faced with a global pandemic. And I personally feel, and if you'd talked to me like 6 months ago, I would have said, long-term strategy. It's great for the economy. We all have to think long-term, right? And I think my thinking has changed a little bit in that I still really see the benefit long-term, in thinking and strategizing long-term for the economy. But I think right now we're in this short-term kind of abyss, and it's not a time for profit. This is a time for us to do whatever personally we can do to help get through the next 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. We have to do it. We have to think creatively about how we can all use our resources in a positive way. There's all this talk about small businesses. Obviously, I'm an owner of a small business, but really there's 3 kinds, right? In my opinion, in my experience, that we could kind of categorize businesses in. And I'm referring more to small. And again, just my opinion. But, there's the businesses that operated pre-COVID that are now considered non-essential, right? So these are businesses, in most cases, that because of the state or, the county, whatever it may be, have been forced to shut their doors, right? They're not doing any business right now. They're closed. Then there's the businesses that are considered essential and have the option of staying open. However, for several different reasons, have decided not to. Perhaps their employees are fearful to leave their homes, right? Perhaps as a business owner, they feel they owe it to their employees to make them stay home, right? So there's the essentials that choose to stay closed. And then there's the essentials that have tried to reinvent themselves in any way possible. But just to be clear, these businesses are not doing the volumes, not even close to the volumes that they've done pre-COVID, right? Mm-hmm. So right now we are in survival mode, and I feel like we should all be thinking about survival and how we can help each other, right? It's heartbreaking to think about, listen, the PPP, the Stimulus Act, there's $500 million that's been earmarked to help small businesses between the first wave and the second wave. And I think the intention there is great. I mean, when in our lifetime, has 500 million been just like, put out there, right? And bank accounts being funded, and many that haven't been, because the money's run out, which is also heartbreaking. But it's challenging for me as a small business owner to think about the businesses that are considered non-essential that are closed, right? They'll never get forgiveness on that loan. Mm-hmm. So even though they have 6 months before they would have to start paying the loan back, they still have to pay it back in 2 years. So not only do they have to, out of the gate, maintain or resume, I should say, the same volume of business that they did pre-COVID, but they have to grow it significantly to be able to pay back that loan. And it's a challenge, I think, for many, because for the non-essential, for the essential who choose to keep their employees at home, right, or whose employees don't feel comfortable working, and then for the essentials that have chosen to reinvent themselves, they're there's not going to be 100% forgiveness. And so that means that all of the small businesses are going to be really straddled for the next 2 years paying back these loans.
Yeah.
The intentions were great. You know, I often think to myself, like, would it have been better to perhaps channel some of that money into unemployment, right? So that we can help the people that are home, so that we can give them more. You know, these are the things that kind of keep me up at night, right? You hear about farmers. Oh, it's just so, it's devastating to think about farmers that are having to dump milk and produce because they don't have the distribution mechanisms to be able to transport it to the people that need it.
Well,
You know?
this has been incredibly interesting. You're an amazing woman. If I could ask you one last question, okay? What's the one thing you hope that people take from this once in a lifetime experience, this experience that is unlike anything we ever prepared for or thought was going to happen? What's the one takeaway that you would hope that you yourself and others could either feel or now be granted with the wisdom of blank because of it?
Oh boy, there's so many things. You know, I guess the distinction for me between need and want is a big one. You know, I think for many, not for all, we've kind of lived in this space where this is what I want, and this is, you know, I have perhaps the opportunity to be in a place where I can realize that, right? And I think what it does is it kind of resets. I hope it will reset all of us and put us in a place where we can actually feel and be more compassionate about the people that have lived their entire life in a place where they're satisfying their basic needs.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I guess I hope that we can come out of this much more compassionate and appreciative, and also really focusing on what's really important, what we need versus what we'd like to have.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gabby. This has been really amazing.
Thank you for
You're
having me.
an amazing person. And I think, you know, all that you're doing while, by the way, taking care of 3 kids who are in school online, your husband working from home. But we thank you for all that you're doing for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabby.
Thank you, Jim.
You're
Thank you,
amazing.
Jocelyn. And you guys keep up the good work. This is great.
Thank you so much.